Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the October 18th meeting of the Citizen Oversight Board. Board Chair Julia Richmond is having some technical difficulties, but will hopefully join us shortly, and we'll take over the meeting from there. As a first order of business, can we have a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting, September 20th?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 That's unanimous. Excellent. The minutes have been approved. We have just a few announcements to make. First off, there is still one vacancy on the board that the mayor's office is working to fill. So if you or someone you know might be a good fit, please apply. There's information, I believe, on the mayor. There's information on the Citizen Oversight Board's website, as well as I believe on the mayor's sort of boards and commissions page. Rufina, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to see if you have any information on the filling of that vacancy. Do we have applications? Where is the process now?
I know that there have been some applications to the mayor's office. I believe they are in the process of scheduling at least one interview. They have scheduled interviews in the past, so it's really up to the mayor's office as to whether or not they choose to move forward with particular candidates. There's not like a hard deadline, and then they'll choose the best of the applicants that they receive by then. It's just whenever they choose to move forward with a candidate, they have that power.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is that there's plenty of time to be recruiting individuals to the vacancy.
Yes, I mean, well, yes and no. There's no hard deadline. They could move forward at any point. And however, anyone that you recruit or that gets recruited that is not selected for this vacancy, there will likely be another vacancy next year. Just as people's terms are completed, as the turnover happens, it's always good to have a pool of interested candidates.
Yeah, whose terms are possibly ending in 2025?
I can get that for you in just a moment.
I think mine is one.
We'll get Stefan and Larry,
Mhm.
and possibly one other.
And are those at the end of the year, Stefan, or are they at some point, like the point that you were appointed is the end of the term?
I can
That's a
pull
really,
it for you.
it's a good question. I think I was appointed at the beginning of like in a January, February time period, Fina, something like that. So coming up, right? So then coming up in the next 3 months or so, yes.
Yeah, and was yours a mayor or council?
Okay,
Mayor.
We have 3 terms that will be up January 1st, 2025, and those are eligible for reappointment. So it's not necessarily goodbye. Larry, Stefan, and Tymisha are all up. I believe Tymisha has not served a full term, so she was appointed to fill the remainder of her term. So she's only been on the board for about 2 years at that point.
Oh, okay.
So, but those terms will be up and will need to be reappointed at the start of next year.
Okay, thank you.
Or filled. Yes. The other announcement to make is just a welcome back to Denver to the board members who attended the annual conference from the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, also known as NACOL. Hopefully we will have some time towards the end of this meeting to debrief that and to share some comments and feedback. And with that, we sent a few questions in advance to you, Director Saldate. Welcome. If you have an opening statement or remarks you'd like to make, please feel free, and then we can get into our discussion.
Morning, Daniel. Good morning, board members. Thanks for the time for today's meeting. as Daniel said, there were 3 questions that were sent to me earlier this week to be prepared to answer. And then, as always open to your additional questions or clarify if needed. Danielle, again, rely on you if you want to flag my attention, because I'm kind of on the screen. I have the questions up and I can't necessarily pay attention to the hand. So if you
Certainly.
want to just grab my attention when we have a question, I will definitely pause to give an answer.
Will do.
Also, Emily Locke, our legislative and policy director here at the Department of Safety, is on, and she's on to help, gather notes if there's follow-up or anything else that we need. She keeps that. So if there's anything we need to know, we have Emily on. And then if there's an answer that she might be able to provide more context to, she's free to do that. So I'll start with the first question. The first question said, we, the board, sent a letter last month following up on the non-monetary settlement terms issued. The letter expressed our appreciation for the steps you've taken on the issue and recommendation that the disclosure process you have created be formalized into Department of Safety policy. Do you have a response to that recommendation? Yes. So just for everyone's context, and maybe if we have public on the call, this was in relation to a recommendation and work that the Citizen Oversight Board had been doing around when the city agrees to settlements on plaintiff claims of these may result from misconduct, from accident, from things like that involving our public safety agencies. I think the most noteworthy of these seem to have been involved in the George Floyd protest, the murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest and protests that occurred after that. There are a number of settlements, legal settlements that took place with plaintiffs regarding those issues. Specifically, the board asked about how do we track, how do we make sure that we are accountable to the non-monetary settlement terms in those. And these are historical too. And that's really, I think, where you also asked questions about some of our historical settlements, key settlements in the city around significant incidents that resulted in settlements, and what happened with that, and how are we tracking that? How are we tracking that we are completing those, and how are we being transparent around those terms? So with that, we first did a deep dive into the history of these and the settlement claims that we were aware of. I think the board had asked for some specific ones, and so we got all those for you all. We gathered that all, working with our partners at the city attorney's office, and then obviously went through, how we've accomplished and tracked and met those terms. Additionally, you had recommended as a board that we make that process more transparent, and that is what we've done. We started, I think, a couple of months ago, or maybe even longer or shorter. Time right now is a little difficult for me, but recently we did start with a settlement that we had recently entered into regarding a plaintiff claim, and we posted that on our website. We will continue to do that, and that's what I stated in your question, is asking us to formalize that in the policy. And yes, we are formalizing that in the policy. I was actually hoping to share it with you this morning, but it's still in draft form, and it's still undergoing some legal review, just, because obviously the city attorney needs to review it, because it's critical to their action. They're the ones that formally enter these into on behalf of the city and this Department of Safety. So we have them looking over that. I want to thank our special counsel here in the Department of Safety from the city attorney's office. Wendy Shea has really helped us draft that policy, which codifies what we have committed to and what I just talked about. That will be, and hopefully here, once we get through that, I will share it with independent monitor Liz Perez Castle and her team, and then I'll also share it with the board through you, Daniel, once we get that, so that you all have it. We will have it where we post it to where we post these non-monetary terms on the website. We'll also post a link to the policy so that you all are familiar with it and that the public is familiar with it. So I'll pause there for if there's any questions or comments regarding that particular issue.
I have joined. Can you all hear me? I'm having technical issues. Okay, great. Look at that. So I joined in the middle of what you were saying. So just so I'm clear, are we working towards an institutional answer for this, or are we still sort of operating on the goodwill front?
Nope. That we are codifying it in policy. So it will be in Department of Public Safety policy. That draft, and in fact,
Oh, that's the policy you're talking about.
That's the policy I'm talking about. Yep.
Okay, good.
That draft so will live in Department of Safety policy. So obviously all our departments in our Department of Safety, police, fire, sheriff, 911, community corrections, all those entities, we undergo any sort of or have any non-monetary settlements, we will post them on that. And also that's the policy that will also be linked where we're posting these settlements. It is in draft form. It's in fact, I was just looking at it, but it's still in, where there's remarks and things and edit. So once we get it further along the line toward the final draft, I will share it with you all and the monitor.
Okay, great. And that doesn't require council approval or anything. That's just an internal policy on your part. Okay,
yes.
Great. I see Alfredo's hand is up.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Director Saldate.
morning.
Really glad to hear the progress that's being made towards codifying that policy and bringing more transparency to those non-monetary settlements. So I want to start with that. I'm wondering, however, though, in terms of how do we continue to close the loop on those non-monetary settlements? Will there be a way to track the progress towards those also?
Yes, so that is also, and thank you for pointing that out. I should have added that clarity because it won't only be on that website. This is the settlement term. We're just posting that. That is a critical part of it, is tracking for the accountability purposes of when we've met that or when we've instituted that or what is the proof of that. I'll give an example of like a non-monetary term. A non-monetary term could be train your police officers on this or provide training on this. So then I would then, once we would first put it up there, this is what the settlement term was. And then we would then, once that was completed, whether through rosters and all that, I would then report on there as well for the public that we completed it. So therefore that would be there. And then folks could see if we saw that it's been reported that this was a term and there's not subsequently a tracking or proof of that, the completion of that, then that could, where the accountability mechanism can be there to show us that, and you all can ask questions and the public can ask questions on when will we meet this term of that settlement.
Very good. Thank you.
That's great. A follow-up question from Alfredo. Rufina, I'll get to you in 1 second. One of the things I think we learned from our oversight of the implementation of the George Floyd protest recommendations from the previous monitor was it can be a little hard to discern the specific action that the departments are taking in order to remediate findings, or in this case, non-monetary terms. So an example would be, you need to train your officers on less lethal weapons, right? And that was one of the recommendations coming out of the George Floyd report. And then sort of what we get back is like, we've done munitions training for our officers, right? And so it's like, is that specifically addressing this, or is it sort of generally addressing it where you're going to do it anyway, or is it in direct compliance with XYZ thing? So what I'm wondering is if we can get information in that dashboard or table or whatever it ends up being that just says, here were the specific actions we took to implement this change. I feel like we got a lot of like, we did training kind of vibes, and that doesn't help us feel like we're actually getting to the root of change that needs to take place. So as we sort of start to build that out, I'm hoping that we can get to a level of specificity that we can say the problem was X, the solution is Y, we've done specifically Y. And so just wondered about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that. And with the example you utilized, it's disappointing that is the view of what you got back, because the department did, they put together a formal report about what we all did. So like in that example, it wasn't just training. We actually banned the munitions, the utilization of the 40 millimeter, projectile that had caused so much harm during that misuse of it. It caused some harm during the things, and that was additionally brought, and that was a long report. So yeah, that is what we would hope to. That's a level of transparency we always aspire to. It's not just to check a box, it's to really tell you this is the substantive stuff we've done to address it, not only meet our training requirements that for post, but exceed that as well.
That's great. Yeah, and recognizing new leadership came in the middle of the implementation of changes there. I do feel like that changed over time, but initially the sort of we're doing training was what we got a lot of.
Yep, no, I get it. Yep, thank you.
So, okay, Rufina, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Director Saldate. I wanted to ask, so where would I find this? It's obvious, is it right? It's not there's not anything there yet, right?
No, there is. So we do
there
have
is?
a link, and I can get that link for you posted. In fact, Emily's probably working on it now in the background, so we can get that to you all and get it emailed to Daniel so we can share it with you. It
Yes,
should be.
I would appreciate that, because I'm, certainly, I'm not totally unable to get around on systems, but I'm looking at the website and I'm trying to figure out where I might find it. I figured out it's data and transparency, I'm assuming, but then where specifically in that area would I find it? So thank you, I appreciate that.
We'll get that to you. And Daniel just.
Daniel's already on it.
Yep, got it. Yep, thank you.
Gee.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Thanks.
And
Carrie,
just on
your hand's
that,
up?
just to add one concept to that. So our website is constantly, we're taking feedback. So if there's something that would make it more easier or navigatable or just user friendly, please let me know. I meet weekly with our comms team, and they are looking for that suggestion, and we look to implement those quickly on responsiveness to our.
Well, I may be a good test case, so
Okay.
I'll give you some feedback.
All right, thank you.
Karen, go ahead.
And good morning, everyone. Is whether or not in instances where training has been recommended, if this type of training can be described in way of how many hours were allotted to the training, how many departments, how many of the officers have been trained up to that point, and what's left, and also whether or not the training has been implemented at the academy.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely understand that question and the parameters that you laid out. And that will be and should be part of our report back to you all. Like I know we're capable of doing that because we also track that with Colorado Post. That's the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board that certifies police officers in the state and around the country. Each state has one. And so we have to have training that meets their standards for their parameters. And then our officers have to be trained at a set number of hours. DPD is proud to report that we exceed those hours in our training, but on specific cases related to settlements, we will be able to report not only, this is how many officers were trained, or maybe report the progress to that training, and then also say this is how many hours of training, and we will provide a description of what that training was.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If we're not any more questions, I'll jump to the next question. And so given the way things look right now, do you anticipate being able to acquire the public-facing portal for IA Pro in 2025? And so just to add some more context, there is just to this topic here. So first of all, IA Pro is the application that our internal affairs entities utilize to manage cases. It is also the application that our independent monitor and Citizen Oversight Board has access to monitor those cases, to monitor the evidence in those cases, the documents, the videos, all those things. This is where it's managed. So when a case number is given, it's a case open in IA Pro. That is where the investigator tracks it, the progress. That's how the communication go back and forth between the monitor and the entities, either being the administrative investigative unit from the Public Integrity Division and Department of Safety, or the Denver Police Department's Internal Affairs unit. So that's that program. Probably it's been over a year ago now. I had reported to you all that I had heard about a new product with the IA Pro application, and it was a public-facing portal that would help streamline citizen or anyone's complaining or complaints. It could also be used for commendation type reporting. So IA Pro had this new product on that they were advertising, where they had this portal, and basically it was a link that you would hit off, kind of just like on, and our intention would be one day to have it on the independent monitor's website, or all our agencies' website, and our Department of Safety website, to where if someone wanted to make a complaint or a commendation, they could click on that link. It automatically worked directly with the portal in IA Pro. And as the complainant is entering the information about that, it is going into IA Pro, and it is creating a case number. It's also creating like a feedback mechanism where they also, the complainant would get that right then and there. They wouldn't have to wait. They wouldn't have to do what they do now, make a phone call, get an email, or that kind of administrative kind of jumps that we have to do now. So that has been something, immediately when I heard about it, we looked into it. It was still very early technology. We're working at it. We're trying to identify budget. As you all know, in this time frame too, we've been experiencing reduced sales tax revenue in the city and county of Denver, which has made all our budgets very difficult, and we've been very tight on budget. So trying to find budget for this has been difficult. However, there was also another change that occurred in this process. The company that had owned IA Pro, in fact, it was a small company. I had met the owner at past conferences around IA Pro, and very good company. They sold to a large company, a larger police application provider. The good thing there is that police application provider that they sold to is Versaterm, who also handles the police department's, our Denver Police Department's records management system. So the price went up also significantly for this technology. What I am trying to and understanding, as we're just still going through our budget process for 2025, we did not have a spot for that in our 2025 budget projection that we submitted. However, I am still trying to get this accomplished, either working with the vendor around, trying to bundle our services and what we're paying for on the bigger thing, and maybe trying to get some bundled pricing for this. But I'm not stopping, and hopefully can report someday soon that we have identified a mechanism to make this. Really, it would make it just a much easier experience, and I think a better customer service experience for our for the people that are making these complaints. And also it will make a streamlined efficiencies on the back end with our administrative support teams and our administrative investigator teams. So like now, there could be, I'll give an example of how a case could come in now. A case could either be emailed to the independent monitor or called into the independent monitor. The independent monitor staff would then email that information to let's say the DPD Internal Affairs Bureau. That DPD Internal Affairs Bureau would, supervisor would then email it to a detective or one of their technicians or sergeants that would then open up the case. Then they'd have to, manually put that in, tag that in. That administrative process and the workload, which isn't a ton, but you can imagine it compounds over several complaints. We can get more efficiency when when it's automatically generating that number, generating that, and the complainant has it. So that is something that we're hopeful for. I know that it isn't ideal. I wish we could have had the ability to. There's a lot of things I wish we could afford, but we don't. But this is something. I will also just note that I think more of where we would see the improvement is on the customer service side and the the streamline like I just described. However, I don't think that we have a problem of people wanting to make complaints and they don't have a mechanism to do so. I have not seen that problem. We make it very simple now. And there's and not only we, I should also say the independent monitor does a really good job in publicizing, having their pamphlets, having their things. We have them in our jail and our jail pods around the system. Our websites are, very keyed into, having links that are very distinguishable to make complaints. And then obviously we even accept, email, digital, anonymous complaints. So while it would be, I think, ideal to have this and a better process flow, it is expensive right now, but I'm hoping to get that soon, and I'll keep at it. And we have an amazing team here that tries to make things work, and so hopefully we can make this work.
Just a few questions on that. Can you remind us of the overall budget for the public safety departments?
Round
terms, that's fine.
I think in round terms, it's overall, I think 600 million, if I remember right.
And then this software, I seem to recall it was like $40,000 or something.
It's actually that when I say the price, it went up a lot. It went up to closer to 100 from what I've heard the last estimate.
Okay.
There's also some other costs that we would be associated with it. So that quote is based off, and I know I'm talking to the right person because you're in tech. That would be us having it on-prem and us hosting the server and all that. So we would have to then allocate dollars for that infrastructure.
To technology services. Okay, that makes sense. So I just want to sort of say out loud, because it's been a while since we've talked about this, that the point was less about people being able to submit complaints, as I think we would acknowledge that, the problem is not particularly problematic. People don't know that they can complain. That's a different problem. But the opportunity here is to help folks understand where their matter is in terms of the evaluation and consideration. So, we are in the oversight business here, and I still sometimes am confused on where things are in the process based on the myriad of bodies that can review an issue. And so, if I have lost someone who I care about, and I'm looking for information about that, having at my fingertips at least a sense of like, this is moved in the process or it hasn't, can be very valuable. And I can imagine that this would be a net benefit to your team as well, because I'm sure that you field a lot of phone calls from people who are upset, and a portal will not, ease their pain, but it may reduce the kinds of phone calls and administrivia that your team is being asked to do. So while, there is a cost on the software, I imagine that there will be administrative load trade-offs for the team. So, just to state publicly, the point of the portal is less about people being able to make a complaint. The point of the portal is so that people have transparency into where in the process their complaint is.
Yeah, I'll push back a little bit on that being the point of it. And if I misrepresented the expectations of what that would be, I apologize. I think the point from our end was to make it a much more easier customer service. Yes, having a status to them, But I got to tell you, the status is not, I don't think, going to be that much of taking a burden, lifting a burden off of us to explain to them. If you know, if that status is, it is at investigative review or it is at conduct review office review. I mean, I think most folks that get that are still going to need interpretation
Sure.
and still should be served with a by us fielding phone calls. That's what we're here for. And that isn't a burden to us. That's our job, is to keep people notified of that. So yeah, I definitely get that. I would say, I don't know if that's the expectation that they're going to have at their fingertips up to the minute, kind of where it's at. Yes, they will, but I still think that up to the minute where it's at will not answer, well, where does that mean? Where does that fall in the city of the county of Denver's discipline process? What is the timeline? And those things, I think, will still need to be fielded by our folks that work in those things. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense.
I definitely understand the and don't argue with the fact that it will reduce some administrative workload for us and help the customer. But there's sacrifices with budgets, and I don't, trust me, I don't get everything I want in them, but it's shared sacrifice around the city. But I'm still hoping that doesn't make me stop trying to get it done. I'm still trying to get it done.
Yeah, and so perhaps as we move forward with this idea, it would be good to sort of collaborate on like what the outcomes are. I can imagine if we had a portal that said, you know, case submitted and then pending for 2 years, that is completely unsatisfying to people in terms of information, and then it's like closed, right? And so really understanding what the functionality is in there. And I agree, it's not satisfying if you're dealing with, you know, the death of a loved one, for example, to just sort of see pending or in case review. You know, it comes to my mind that it would be interesting also for us to understand sort of how long, you know, matters stay in various statuses. And so that feels like something that could be useful to report.
Yep, that's something that we do track diligently and that we are looking to track. And I'm happy to report that we also do quarterly trends meetings with our leadership and our internal affairs structures with the independent monitor and folks. And we talk about timelines and things like that. And where are we getting bogged down? Where are we, where is the slowing down, where we're not meeting our case timeline needs, or what's holding that up? And that is work that I think that is impactful for folks, and that reporting that, being transparent around that is important. So
yeah. You know, we also saw a case recently where one of the arguments for declining discipline was that it had taken a long time. And so it seems like that's it's a pretty typical part of the process. And also the timeliness is really a business process issue. It's not a outcome issue. So anyway, it just comes to my mind that there's a lot of opportunity here for timeliness.
Yeah. And in that particular case, I think you're referring to, because I was troubled when I heard that too. And I did the research on it. The reason for the delay on that one was the pandemic.
Right.
There was some true things that happened there that caused some extraordinary time lapses in there. And I don't necessarily agree with the timing being the reason for not. I'm saying I didn't put that in there, right? I wouldn't have said that, but yeah, when I spoke to independent monitor about that one, yeah, I definitely understand that.
Right. You know, timeliness also costs the taxpayers a lot of money. If we've got officers on administrative leave for 2 years, they're not helping the department, but they are costing the city money. And so, you know, that timeliness is not without consequence. Yep. We have heard from to the point of like the department needing to reach back out and communicate with constituents. We have had constituents, you know, let us know that the timeliness in the communications is lacking. And so, you know, I can imagine there's a lot on the plates of the team, but, you know, if we are saying the most important part of the process is human beings connecting with other human beings, you know, we've heard some opportunities there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. In fact, sometimes I field those complaints directly. If it's some, you know, a complainant, sometimes that'll land in my email inbox, or I'll be notified of that. And I endeavor to get that really, you know, get that addressed as soon as possible. It is a matter of resources and you know, just the case management for investigators and the folks that work this is, you know, they're ever growing, there's ever things, and that's not an excuse. That is something that we do work hard on, and we should work diligently on letting know that the people that were affected by alleged misconduct or things like that, that they know about what's happening, they know about the process, they understand it. I think that would provide more trust in our systems and more trust in our departments, which we're all working towards. So yeah, that's definitely noted, and it's something that I know the leadership teams at all these agency departments and our internal affairs structures all recognize and try to meet as best we can. Any other questions or comments on this?
Alfredo, did you have a question? I see something in the chat.
No.
There's a question in the question and answer.
Daniel, can you read that for me?
Yeah. We have a question from a community member on the call.
And that was the question I asked was,
Yeah.
you know, folks saying that they hadn't actually received responses. So.
Yep, I just noted that, and I will get a response out, so we'll make sure that response is that you're notified on that.
Okay. Great.
There's one more question we submitted in advance, or is that the last one?
There's one more.
Okay, great. Let's go there.
One more question, and this is we would like to have a more in-depth conversation around the practical aspects of a potential public database of disciplinary orders. We believe it would be beneficial for community members to be able to see the orders for themselves and to be able to inform their feedback or advocacy with specific examples. So thank you for raising that. This has been a topic I know I've discussed with you all before, more generally, and I'm glad that you're bringing it up now on a more to get a more in-depth conversation about it. So first, let me tell you what we do when we get a discipline order. When a discipline is administered against, a formal discipline is administered against any of our sworn members in our departments, that order is provided to the press. We provide it monthly to the press. We've done this before. This was mandated by laws in some cases around this. Denver has been the leading edge around the transparency around this. And then the press obviously will report on some of those cases, some of those discipline orders, and those are unredacted discipline orders. The officers' names and things are out there, and they're on there. When we discuss this, and there's also additional reporting that we do that we are mandated to do as well. So those discipline letters and what happens there. First, I want to note for our public that are on this call that the independent monitor has oversight over those. They monitor those. They see those cases. We have discussions around those discipline orders. They make recommendations around those, and all that process is happening. When the discipline is imposed, additionally to the press, there are sometimes mandated reportings that we have to send to Post, the Colorado Post Board. Those are significant incidents around integrity issues, around use of force, serious misconduct issues that Post gets notified. Post places those on a public database, public facing portal to see. Additionally, there's reporting to Post. There's also, if it's an integrity issue, we have mandated reporting around an officer if they are being, if they're being found sustained for a violation of being untruthful or a law violation, something serious like that. They're subject to what we call a Brady notification. That's named after case law of Brady. And what that is that we have to notify all prosecutorial authorities that this officer has a sustained misconduct claim around untruthfulness or whatever that Brady issue is. That can be used, and that needs to be disclosed for any case that officer is involved with. to the defense in those cases. So that is so I wanted to make sure that folks know that for those types of things, there is some mandatory reporting that goes through, that we complete, that we track, and that goes on. And then additionally that press, outlet to the press. When we've talked about this before, where and we had talked about how can we be more transparent around this process? How can we talk about it, get people, the people know. The other thing is what we kind of a tail on to what we just talked about. Complainants are notified of what that outcome of the case was. So that is one other additional notification. However, when we talked about this before, I brought up the issue of, if it lived in a public website, and this is what I wrestled with, and I've talked to our employee unions about this too, their representative unions about this, is when it's in a public place, like if it's on our websites, it is almost, how do we balance that? Do we have a time period on that? Knowing and recognizing that once it's on the internet, it's on the internet forever. But is that something, and is that an additional discipline for that person? Is what kind of stigma is associated with that person, whether it's a minor misconduct claim, a serious misconduct claim? I think there's different perspectives here, but does that have to live there forever? If this person is, everyone makes mistakes, everyone has made a mistake, everyone's going to have something like this. And for it to be kind of on there and on the website and out in front and center, does that need to continue to live there in perpetuity? Knowing that there's all these other notifications that are taking place. And in fact, we send it to the press. So I also appreciate that I definitely understand in the question, the role of, having the public see this and all that. I also see that you all and the independent monitor play a key role to fulfill that need as well, right? The advocacy, the oversight, the seeing these, being a part of these investigations, looking at this and doing that. You're representatives of our community in that. I recognize that, having it out there. So it is a balance, and it is something that I definitely would love more input from you all and from others about. Our police leadership, our sheriff leadership, this is a topic that we've always struggled with. I don't want to put, like, where I've seen throughout my career where an officer or a deputy makes a mistake, and mistake that we all can make. They've served their discipline, they accept their discipline, they're trying to move on for their discipline. There's this constant reminder on a website that they are there, and it's constantly put out there. Now, there's serious misconduct. I think that maybe should follow some people, right? And it does follow some people, and it will be in, if you Google someone, that news report, when it got reported, will be there. So that is there. And so it is definitely, it's not an easy answer. And I don't know that I have it. It's something that we talk about where we're trying to get, when we're talking about trying to put more public facing, usable information out for our folks around the transparency, around our accountability. It is something I've talked about, and what can we do, but I haven't decided on that, and hope to hear from you about what the pluses that you all think, and what the feeling around that you all have on this topic. If I recall, Mr. Stein, we talked about this before, me and you were on this too.
We did. Yeah.
So I'll leave it open to there, and happy to continue talking. So I think essentially I don't have a decision yet on it. It's a tough one. I think it's one that needs to have a lot of discussion. But I definitely also I need to engage with our employee representative groups around this, have strong feelings. So definitely want to balance that.
So I'll just start off by saying a couple of facts. One, the final disciplinary orders are a matter of public record, and so to assume that those couldn't end up on the internet is a bad assumption.
Well, I'm not assuming that.
But like, folks are public employees, and so that there is accountability in the public realm. So that's the first thing, is that these are already sent to the media. I think the board has not necessarily advocated for this sort of like shaming list on the internet, but we have definitely advocated for aggregate information to be presented there. And so I know that in the monitor's report, both in the mid-year report and final report, they sort of put the dispositions in aggregate for disciplinary actions that have taken place in that time period. And so I don't think that would be very hard for the public safety departments to do the same, just so the community can understand, like, is this, you know, are people not doing their weapons training in a pervasive way? Are we having general training issues? Are we having, you know, knowledge gaps on certain things? So I think, you know, it's already published via the monitor's office, and it feels like the safety departments could stand in front of their own outcomes in that way. And so I feel like if, you know, if we could just get to aggregate information, that would be very valuable to the public. The last thing I'll say, which I do think.
I'll just say the reason my response didn't talk about it, address the aggregate, was because that's not what the question was. The question was uploading the orders, not the aggregate orders.
Sure. And you know, I do some of those orders are like, I was mean to my coworker, or I, you know, had conduct unbecoming, which was not, you know, a crime. It was, you know, and many people behave badly at work. And so that, you know, does that need to follow your whole career? I'm not sure. But the other question that sort of remains in my mind is there are often cases of officers or deputies resigning before discipline is applied. And the state law requires that disciplinary actions are completed such that they may be reported to the state in a database, so that we don't have an officer traveling around our cities behaving badly over and over again. And so there is a question in my mind about these sort of cases that would be, you know, put into the state's database, which again is presumably corrable. And so I am interested in those cases in an extreme sense. And I'm also always frustrated that, you know, and of course, an employee can choose to leave before discipline is applied in any employment context. But, you know, in this case, the consequences of that bad behavior not being remediated could be life and death for a person in another jurisdiction, should that individual move to a new location for their job. So there's sort of three questions at play in my mind, which are, how do we get to you know, aggregate level information? How do we address the fact that this information is already public information at the disciplinary order level? And then what do we do about folks who have really yucky behavior that we don't want to take that behavior into another location and harm others? And so that's sort of how I break it down in my mind. But, you know, as a first order of business, I feel comfortable, and if board members disagree, I'm happy to have that disagreement, that aggregate data would be valuable to the public.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's something we can. It's actually something we've done historically, but also we've received feedback when the and I'm glad you mentioned the monitor publishes this. They publish it in formal reporting. They publish it in a semi-annual report. And we didn't want to, and I know speaking with the former monitor, we didn't want to replicate or do things or step in that lane over that reporting, right? We also feel like that coming from the monitor, I believe that the public would trust that and do that. I don't mind. Aggregate data is something that we can get out there. We do put it out there in a lot of realms. We continue to do that. I, in fact, encourage the data analysts that work with RA Pro Data to work closely with the monitors analyst around our methodology, so that we don't have differing numbers, differing reporting, to make it consistent. Because that can happen, you know, especially just the way you pull numbers and data can happen. So I am definitely open to whatever we would want to, and hear from the board, you know, kind of what you would like to see on that. But I'd also want to talk with the independent monitor around not crossing over into their lane of they've kind of owned this role of reporting the misconduct out to the public. If that's something that we want to have together, I'm fine with it. That's something we can do very easily, and I can make that work very easily. To the other part about officers that resign prior to their discipline, we have, and since I've been the executive director, have always, even if an officer, no matter what that misconduct is, resigns prior to their discipline, it could be minor misconduct all the way to serious misconduct that, like, they're resigning in lieu of, we complete the investigation, we complete the findings, and we complete the letters. So that we are also still mandated to report that to post. So that is reported to post. So that, for that very reason, that that you don't have these gypsy officers that misconduct and from one location to the next and keep jumping around. So that is something that we do, we complete, we will always do in that, and we will also do that for officers in lieu of, and that is reported and reflected in our discipline numbers, and I think the monitors as well. And so, yeah, and yeah, I just think that's what we've always done. That's something we're going to do. That's something that we're going to do. And this other thing, and also related to that, there's laws now that when someone is wanting to get to be hired as a police officer, we're trying to hire a lot. We have to go to, if they have worked in a previous law enforcement thing, we go to there and we have to look at their internal affairs records. We have to see everything. So there's been some real, because this was a problem years ago, that the legislature worked to really close those gaps and loops. But here in Denver, we've really worked hard to always make sure that we're on top of that. Did I answer the 3 questions you had there?
Yeah, I think so. It's worth just stating too that there are some data reported on disciplinary actions for both the sheriffs and police departments. What the data represents is like, what are the outcomes by volume and what are the complaints by volume, but you don't actually have the connection, which is like, for these kinds of behaviors, here are these kinds of outcomes. And so it's hard to say how significant the discipline is based on the more significant behavior. So that would be maybe a more interesting look. Stefan, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate this dialogue and this back and forth is really good. I think, it sounds like to me that we're pretty much aligned on the reporting of aggregate data. It sounds like we're very much aligned on, particularly since you do report, particularly with respect to officers who resign before a disciplinary investigation is completed and findings are issued, you're required by law to report that to post. I mean, I have a view on whether, if somebody does that, I think it should have, whatever orders that are issued should appear in, or their disciplinary decisions should be appeared in a public database. I don't know that there should be any time period in terms of not disclosing that over a period of time. But I hear you, as I said before, on other issues. And I think what it comes down to, and the board, I'm sure we all have individual views on this. The issue is with respect to individual disciplinary orders, putting it on a public database by the Department of Safety, what would the position of the public safety be? And I hear you about, and Julia too, about shaming somebody indefinitely and the like. I think that, that's a multi-layered issue. How serious was the misconduct? What kind of discipline, was ordered? What are the mitigating factors perhaps with this officer's conduct since then? That's really multi-layered. Maybe there should be a time period based on the severity of the, of the actions. All sorts of things. And I think that merits a much wider discussion. But I think our point, and the point that Julia is trying to raise, is we would like to have sort of more transparency about that, but it merits a broader discussion about what standards we're going to do with respect to that.
Yep, thank you. Definitely understand.
I'll go ahead, Rufina. I see your hand up.
I'm going to just ask this because I don't know the answer, so I apologize that maybe I should have done a little bit of research. But I wanted to check on the accessibility of your postings on your websites. Are they accessible in Spanish? Are they accessible to people without sight? And are they accessible to people who have color blindness?
So, yes. So thank you for that question. That's a really good question. And it's something that the city and County of Denver has been working really hard at around our language accessibility requirements, work that safety's done with the Department of Justice around these requirements. So our webmaster and the Department of Safety and our comms team, we have citywide direction and guidance around anything we post has to go through, and they're much better at this, but they have to go through whatever that is, whether it's some excerpts from text, or whether it's that it has to be accessible, meaning that for all those things that it can be converted, it can be for those that are hearing impaired or vision impaired, that they can be converted into those routes of communication for them. And for language accessibility. Language accessibility and the requirements of what we try to meet here in Denver is something that we had a new executive order around this, I believe it was last year, and our city is still working very hard to work in the majority of languages that are present here in Denver to have all our communication that we make publicly available in those methods. So in different languages, obviously for hearing and vision impaired folks as well.
So the reason I was asking was that your graph, one of the designated use is a red line, for example. And although I don't know if it has, because usually if you use red, you try to also have a narrative that describes the information.
Yep.
So in this case, I'm not sure that it's fulfilling the, because it's a line, it doesn't have a narrative, at least that I could see. So just want to just point that out to you to check on that.
Yeah, was that from the Department of Safety or was it from our department? Is that a DSC
It's
one?
the Department of, it's that dashboard, internal affairs complaints,
Okay,
and the data and transparency, and I'm seeing the use of red, but it has numbers. But in the other one, the red line, I'm not sure how you would get information, and maybe it's just I'm not seeing it. But yeah, the use of red is sometimes problematic. So just
yep.
FYI.
Well, I know that personally because I'm colorblind as well. So yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, that definitely, and I know that we do that. We try to make those, and that you should be able to hover and then have it accessible with a description of that. So I'll check in with our webmaster on.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay, just sort of one more thought on, we talked about the monitor's office is reporting data, and so would we want to duplicate that data? I'm not sure it's a problem for a department to represent its own actions and information, and so for me, that is sort of not a concern. I'm not sure if other board members or the monitor's office would have concerns about that, but these are, your employees. I think you should feel comfortable standing in front of your own outcomes with them.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and it's not a matter of me not feeling comfortable to stand in front of it. It's that I've tried to assuage concerns before around that was the monitor's role to do. So I have no problem putting ours out there.
Okay, that's great. So perhaps we can work together on some timing around that.
I think the more places, the better. And that way the public is able to find it and it stays consistent and is able to find it in various locations so that they aren't forced to go to just one source, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it could be potentially really complicated in that if there's ever a case, for example, where one gets ahead of the other and then there's any potential discrepancies in what's being presented to the public and avoiding any potential conflict, I think it would be really, really important around making sure that whatever's put out there, that it's done in a really collaborative, transparent way so that there's never any kind of conflict as to whose numbers are accurate and whose aren't.
Yeah, and thank you, Alfredo, for that input. That's exactly what has come up in the past around this topic.
But I wouldn't think, Director Saldate, we'd put anything out there until it was final, right? And until you had a final disciplinary order, and therefore it would be consistent, or am I missing something?
No, it could be that. It could be even like the classification of what we called something and how. I just think there is just when you have two different reporting mechanisms, the way we do data versus the way that it shouldn't be, there could be. And I think with that, we will work always with the monitor to make sure that what we're putting out is consistent with them. But we do this, we'll definitely do it. Trying to be careful that we don't present something that may be getting out in front of something or that is different from what the monitor has putting out, but we're gonna have to be really intentional about that.
Yeah.
Do board members have any other questions for Executive Director Saldate?
I had
Go
one.
ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, and Daniel may have added this. You know, with the election coming up, Daniel triggered something in my head. With the election coming up and how close it appears it's going to be and the passions that exist as a result, what sort of preparations has the Department of Public Safety sort of engaged in trying to be proactive here in the event that we have some pretty significant demonstrations on the street, you know, and the like, that we can expect, you know, perhaps expect after the election results. What's your view on that, Director Saldate?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and yeah, very timely, and happy to address it. So the department and all our departments, safety departments, have been working for probably the better part of a year, closely with our clerk and recorder Lopez, and his team at elections have done a lot of work in this to try to, especially with the problems in our own state around, you know, some of the processes with the election counting and those types of things. He's really worked closely with us around the preparation for any and being prepared for any what if that might occur, and that's for to protect the integrity of the election, the county, all that going out, so that people can get in their votes. They can do that. Our buildings where we're counting the votes are protected, very protected. We play a big part in that, and we are doing a lot of stuff around that planning. I'll tell you, yesterday I met with a bunch of almost all the directors in the city down in our emergency operations center, planning and preparing and prepping for some big events around this. So this is something that we're doing. We have a now weekly call with all people involved, and that would include the elections officials, our Department of Transportation Infrastructure, all our safety departments, everyone around the city that is coming together to make sure that has a piece to making sure that this is a safe and secure election. Now, for the day after, if we have a prolonged count, if we have all the things that we have experienced before in our history, our recent history, that we are prepared also for that and for any sort of civil disorder, protest activity. The other thing I'd like to just mention is that we deal with protests very routinely here in the city and county of Denver. And the fact that they're not making a lot of news and you're not seeing the problems that we saw during the protest of the murder of George Floyd is because we have changed our tactics. We had a large protest yesterday in downtown. Not sure if you weren't downtown, you probably didn't hear about it, but we did. We had one. We had one past weekend, this past weekend, while we had the Great American Beer Fest in town, a large venue and a large thing. And because our tactics and responses have changed, they do go along relatively peacefully. And so we have handled some very big things. I'm not saying that that we can handle anything. I'm just saying that we have changed our practices, our approaches. We are doing things, but we are prepared. We have a different preparation posture, and we are working hard. So we are going through everything we can to make sure that it's safe, secure. We obviously, our DPD intelligence teams and all those track the national. We work with our federal partners really closely on this as well. The FBI, CIS, a lot of the entities in Homeland Security that have really been monitoring this around the country too, around elections, and then surround the national tenor around this. In fact, I'll also call out, we have been prepared for significant visits. So, we just had former President Trump here in town. While it was an Aurora event, he was primarily escorted, and a lot of our Denver police assets and safety assets were deployed to that. And so a lot of planning, a lot of preparation goes into that. And we, anticipate we may have more of that, and we really devote all the resources necessary to make sure that we keep it safe for everyone.
Yeah, I appreciate that. By the way, thank you for talking about the protection of our election officials and workers. You're right. My question was more focused on the aftermath of the election and depending on the results. But I mean, I find personally appalling the attacks on our election officials and workers, and the fact that you all are focused on protecting them as well as people's right to vote is absolutely paramount, you know, for our state. So I appreciate that you mentioned that.
Tymisha asked if there was data that you all will be reporting on that sort of improvement in protest policing. I think that would be really neat to understand.
Yeah,
sort of-
absolutely. So we, like I said, we mentioned, I can give you all the initial report that was sent out afterwards. We are updating that report. We've also heard from council on this. They want to hear more of that. What we continue to do, some of the large protest training we've been doing, our tactics have changed. So I will share that with you all as well. And one of the things that we've been working on, and it's just been kind of tight getting into council, is maybe briefing council committee on it. And if that does take place, I'll make sure that you all are aware, so you know when that's happening.
That's great. Alfredo and I, a number of board members were at a conference this week focused on civilian oversight of law enforcement. And Alfredo and I, maybe others, attended a session on public order policing, which is basically protest policing, and heard from a faculty member at the University of Ohio, maybe, about some work that's happening in Columbus around this. And they've created a specialized team that they call the dialogue team, whose focus is not on policing protests, but on enabling free speech. They're specially trained in sort of large gatherings and de-escalation tactics. And it seemed like a really neat approach. And I think they've seen similar impacts to Denver in terms of like every protest is not a fight and people are not being hurt because they're expressing their First Amendment rights. So it might be something to dig into. I'd be happy to share sort of the notes I took. Yeah.
That is something we have dug into. And in fact, we engaged with one of the national, probably international experts in this space, Dr. Tamara Harold. We put her on contract. This is something she specializes in, and she has helped inform our changes in this practice and around the de-escalation and a lot of those things that we have. While I don't know what differs or what is different from what Columbus is doing, I also will say that we have a lot of practice behind us now and showing that what we're doing is working. And so, yeah, definitely we're always willing to learn and see what others are doing. In fact, Chief Thomas right now is at Major City Police and it's International Association of Chiefs of Police. And I'm also happy to report that a lot of times we're out there presenting to them about people wanting to copy what we're doing.
That's great. I see a question from Larry. Can you provide a budget update and any potential increase or decrease in funding for departments that are of concern or good news, given the lack of capacity for STAR? Is that budget being increased? And you know, we know that budget moved to a different department. Just want to kind of check in with you on that.
Yeah, definitely. So from a budget update, so we are in that budget of the 2025 budget season. Which is laid out, that timeline is laid out by our charter and ordinance. We have gone through the process of presenting our budget. The mayor has submitted his budget. I presented to council on the Department of Safety's budget, and our Department of Safety heads, presented on our proposed budget. Council asked questions. The mayor has received council's letter in response. They had workshops around proposed amendments to the budget. We are in that process right now. So there is a amendment process that is taking place. That's a back and forth between council and the mayor's office around what will become the final budget around, addressing needs and amendments that the council wants to see from the budget we propose. That is not agreed upon to yet. What I understand the timeline being is I believe the mayor's letter in response to the council amendments maybe due today, if I'm right. I think I'm right. And then there will be a back and forth that is negotiated through the council and the mayor's office and the legislative team, and obviously our budget management office and finance team. Then the budget will be submitted for approval, and that approval date has to be, I think it's typically November 11th, but that falls on that would fall on a Monday for the council meeting. But that is a holiday, so it's going to be November 12th will be the council meeting for formal approval of the budget. I don't know where, you know, because I'd be premature to say, this is what our budget's gonna be. I know what we proposed. We did not propose any significant increases other than the key expansion we called out was continuing to hire police officers to reach our authorized strength. And one academy of fire fighters to keep us our you know, stem attrition. And then you know, to backfill what, you know, what we believe will be attrition for the year. And then the sheriff's department in getting more deputies hired. So there was not really, because of the lean budget environment we're at. In relation to STAR, just for clarity, so yes, STAR's budget did get moved over some time ago to the Department of Public Health and Environment. However, you know, we had always had the STAR manager, the person that ran the program through the 911 response system out at 911 was assigned to the Department of Safety. When I moved our resources over to the Office of Neighborhood Safety, I thought it made a lot of sense to have that resource move over to the Office of Neighborhood Safety. So that resource moved over. I've lost some visibility on the STAR budget. I apologize. I don't know. I do know that talking to the mayor and our finance team, that's always a priority to expand where we can to make sure we're meeting the need, and we're always looking at that data. So I wish I had a more specific answer, but I don't really know what exactly was proposed for STAR. I just know that it's always going to remain a priority to us.
Okay, Daniel, perhaps you can help follow up on that information and provide that to the board. Okay. Other questions for Director Saldate?
All righty, thank you for the chat today. I appreciate it. And on the last topic for discussion, happy to continue that dialogue. And when the independent monitor comes back from her leave, and when we'll continue to work closely with her on what that looks like and her team, and would like to report that out. And then once we get the finalized policy on the non-monetary terms, I'll make sure to share it with you all as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. And excited about that work moving ahead. I think that can provide a lot of value to the community. So appreciate that very much. And thanks for staying a little bit extra with us.
No problem. My pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Director Saldate.
Daniel or board members, did we already provide for time to review and approve minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We've already gone through the board business. Great. Great. I see you on from the monitor's office. Do you have matters to discuss that relate to ongoing investigations? Okay. Daniel, go ahead. I see your hands.
Oh, I just wanted to mention, we approved the minutes. We did not go through, and we did announcements. We did not go through all the board business.
Oh, okay, great. Well, let's do that quick. So a few matters of board business. We have selected our vendor to help us, or our partner to help us with strategic planning. That is scheduled for the 16th of November. So please make sure your calendars are blocked off. Our goal is to have all the members attend, since it will be a plan that we will all implement together. If folks would be interested in like a dinner the night before or something like that, I know it was really fun to get to spend time with everyone this week at NACOL, and so more opportunities for that I think are welcome. So just let me know if you're interested. Daniel will be sending out a survey, maybe you already did, behind on email from our strategic planning partner to get board perspectives on a few items. So if you would be prompt in responding to that survey, that would be fantastic. And Daniel's working on a location for the meeting, so if you have ideas, please let him know.
I think DU should host us.
Well, I don't get the locations for free just based on my role, so I'm not sure it's cheaper than other locations, but I will ask. Thank you for suggesting it.
You've got a lot of lovely venues.
It's a beautiful campus. Anyone who would like to attend DU, I highly recommend it.
Okay. If you, I mean, I'm sure I can arrange for a it's on a weekend, a large conference room at our law firm. If that would.
You probably get it for free, so that's options. Yeah.
I'm also been doing some consulting work with Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition. They have a nice new space down here. I'm here now at 22nd and Champa. They have some nice meeting space. I could check into that if that's of interest.
Great, those are great suggestions.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that. Wanted to check in with folks about their experience at NACOL, the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. And if there were sessions that folks attended that were particularly impactful, I'd love to give the opportunity for folks to share that here.
You know, I just attended, and thank you to the group for letting us have that opportunity. This was my first real entree into all of the different aspects of civilian oversight, and it really, really opened my eyes as to all that we've got as our responsibility. Interesting, the very last day, which was yesterday, they were talking about trauma informed, and I was thinking that the focus was going to be on the complainants and others, and it really was actually more about the boards themselves and also the complainants, but it really focused more on you know, what is happening for you as the board member and experiencing all of the different, you know, trauma vicariously and also self-care and whatnot. And so I thought that was an interesting take on it because most times we're focused externally and also talking about the police that we're dealing with, the community that we're dealing with, and the environment itself. So especially now with the political environment as it is, there's a lot of trauma being, you know, the community's being subjected quite a bit. So I think that's worth talking about in our strategic planning retreat. And most times people don't talk about it. I think that's and maybe that's the reason that they brought it up, was that most times you're just going on and on and on and not reflecting on what it is actually doing to you as a board, as an individual. So I just wanted to bring that up, but I thought most of the sessions that I went to were fantastic. The data one, I just was like really struggling because I went to law school so that I wouldn't do math, and there was a lot of figures and everything, but I found it helpful because we are going to be doing a lot of data review, and so I wanted to expose myself to that. But it was very good, and I don't know that we'd ever have the budget to send everyone, but I would love it if everyone could get that experience. So thank you, and that's what I would say.
I think at this point, everyone on the board has been. So I think and a few folks multiple times. So I think that's great. Other reflections? And thanks for sharing that, Rufina.
Yeah, I was really grateful to have been able to spend some more time, some more humanistic time with each of the board members. I know Alfredo and I were able to really connect around those pieces. So that's a really cool function of everything. But there was a session around meeting resistance with diplomacy. And I think that session was really informative because of how those skills during that conversation can be really practical in other aspects of our life. I think that there were some folks who provided critiques around NACOL's ability to give us skills and understanding that can allow us to bring it back to our communities. As it seems that there's like an hour and a half of folks just kind of presenting a PowerPoint to us. But that session was really something that I can take home and really try to implement in my relationships with folks and in the professional workspace. And so I was really grateful for that.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I really appreciated that personal connection that we don't often get. And it was really important to understand the national landscape to me. and to understand the different models that are available for oversight and where Denver and the COB and the OIM fit into all of that. And I definitely came back with a lot more questions, which I think is the purpose of it, to help better situate the work that we do. And the workshop that to me stood out the most was the policy change through personal stories. And it was really important again to remember that as difficult of this work can be for us as members and commissioners, why it is that we're here and the people that we represent, and the importance that this role has in uplifting those stories of our community that tend to be over policed, and be able to come back with those insights to be a better advocate and a better bridge, and create that understanding was really important. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. Sounds like a really valuable experience for lots of folks. The session that I got a lot from was, as I had mentioned to Executive Director Saldate, was around public order policing and about really thinking differently about how the police engage with folks expressing their First Amendment rights, and this sort of important moment we're in with increasing protests and demonstrations as part of our sort of regular cultural zeitgeist. There were some interesting things in there about this sort of pervasive nature of a boogeyman theory, like starting in the 60s, that there was always somebody like yucky in the crowd, right? And so the crowd being over policed in response to like, this person who was going to stir up the most trouble kind of thing, which is stuff I still hear, rather than looking at the crowd and saying, what are they actually doing? And so that was really interesting. And then this work that's happening in Columbus, I think, is particularly interesting, taking officers, especially training them in dialogue, de-escalation, and tools of sort of conflict resolution, and having their focus not be on policing, but on enabling free speech. And that really gets to like the protect part of, and the serve part of what the police are supposed to be doing, right, is helping Americans pursue their liberties rather than inhibiting them. And so it was a really inspirational session for me. And certainly
Julia, I'd like to share the PowerPoint that we received for the trauma session. And I'd like to have a little bit of discussion on it in the retreat or in another meeting, whichever when you think is best. But I don't want it to just, go to the side. I do think that we're at a nice point that we could talk about it and utilize it.
That sounds great. Yeah, I think the agenda is yet to be formed. I will say, having gone through this once with the team, we had a hard time getting the agenda to one day. So I think we have to be pretty precious about the topics. But if folks feel like that's a really important focus for us, then, happy to have that be an agenda item. What I'll also say is, folks during the conference were asking me like, how come we don't do this? Or could we do this, right? Like, that's what I want to explore with all of you during strategic planning. There's no reason we do things one way or another, other than, that's how we do them. But that doesn't mean that's the anchor for us. So I think everything's on the table, things that, came up for you in terms of like, we haven't talked about this at all with these safety leaders or in our own teams. And really, this is something I want to focus on. Like, that's all great. Let's talk about that. So, I think we had some conversations about subcommittees, about topics to focus on, about community engagement, as, a couple of examples. But please bring those to our strategic planning efforts. If in the survey there's a space for, what else would you like to say? Include it there. And this is the board's board. So I'm eager to have you all drive sort of where we go from here. Anything else folks would like to discuss? I think we covered the board business list.
And just say, for folks who incurred expenses related to travel to the conference, if you want to file for reimbursement, please get me those receipts as soon as possible. I know some of you already have, but just take maybe a few moments this weekend to look back through your expenses and receipts and get those all to me so that I can promptly file for reimbursement for any eligible expenses.
Okay, anything else that we would like to discuss in this meeting? It sounds like we don't have a reason to adjourn to executive session. So really everything else to cover would be in this meeting if folks have other thoughts, comments, or discussion topics.
I'd be happy to go over the new training process. I haven't had a chance to talk to all board members about that yet.
Okay, you want to go through that quickly?
Sure, I could do that. I think as most of you know, I've been spending a fair amount of time recently reworking the training and onboarding process for new board members. And special thanks to Rufina. She's been sort of piloting and being the guinea pig for this as she's the newest board member. She's been giving me some great feedback. But one of the first things I was asked to do when I was first hired about 3 years ago now, was to create a training process for board members, or an improved training process for board members, which I did, but it kind of translated to several different walls of text. That was, tough to get through if you weren't, if reading is not your preferred method of learning, it was pretty rough. And it was also limited to 4 different categories of sort of COB, OIM, DPD, DSD, and then sort of the discipline process. The new process that we've come to is actually split up into 7 instead of 4. So it includes some additional content around open meetings and citywide guidance related to being on boards and commissions. And here, I can share it. But each of those 7 different segments now will contain a video recorded presentation of myself walking through some PowerPoint slides, and then so there's a sort of an audio visual component. There'll be some readings attached to that, various reports, annual reports, things like that, and then there will be an activity. So whether that's the first one is filling out paperwork. It's a fun activity. But then subsequently, having meetings with the board chair or the OIM, or, doing a ride along, things like that. And so each of those segments will be broken up into several different components there. And I'm happy I could share right here. I can share the outline for folks. Here we go. So it's going to start, and I've sort of boxed for some of the larger presentations. I have the outline roadmap in the box on the right. But starting off with the first presentation being open meetings, open records, city ethics policies, and how the city handles money. The second one being very much the sort of an overview of the board and the monitor's office, including the charter, the ordinance, responsibilities, as well as some of the history around the creation and then evolution of the board and monitor's office. Third presentation is a shorter one on expectations, includes the bylaws and sort of general practices around board meetings. Fourth one is discipline process. That's over an hour. It's in depth, but it really breaks down the discipline process into its various steps and the ways it can get complicated. And it's followed by a meeting with the OIM where there's an opportunity for new board members to talk to the monitor's office about not, what they do, but also the discipline process and how it works. I've gone through it in policy and how it sort of should work. And they can have that opportunity to meet with the monitor's office about how it can get complicated in specific cases sometimes. And then the last three are going over the Denver Police Department, Denver Sheriff's Department, and then sort of the greater safety ecosystem, which would include 911 and fire and STAR and things like that. And each one sort of includes, the structure, staffing, some major milestones. So that would include major lawsuits, reforms, major policy changes, things like that, that probably about the past 15, 20 years. And then also a little bit of the public data that's available that they report. And so as folks, I'm happy to include this outline and send that out here in the roundup email this weekend. But this is not final. As I mentioned, Rufina is going through it and providing feedback from experiential feedback. But if you look at it and say, hey, why don't we switch these two? What do you think about that? Very, very open to making changes still. And if you'd like, copies of the slides or the recordings, happy to share those as well. I know, you probably have a lot better things to do than listen to me talk for an hour straight on some of these. But if that is something that you'd be interested in, please let me know, and I'm happy to share those with you.
Well, I'm going to be a little more critical now. Now that I realize I'm the only one. But yeah, it's been very good. It's been very good.
Yeah, I think it looks good. One question / suggestion that I have, one of the things that I really struggled with, and I think still continue to sometimes, is the acronyms. And if there was somewhere a cheat sheet for that, I think that could be a great addition to it.
Certainly. It's a great feedback.
I also feel like I need the disciplinary process steps tattooed on my arm so I can always reference them because I'm never quite clear where something is.
You know what we need is that thing like the quarterbacks use,
Right.
so that we've got it right here as we
right.
talk to people.
During the board meeting, like, what group is that? What are they supposed to do? So
You need a very long tattoo.
I know. It'd have to be a whole body,
Exactly.
situation. Awesome. Any other thoughts on that, Daniel? Just, while folks are thinking about questions, perhaps. Thank you for putting that together. It has been something that's really important. And,
I would say this, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, since.
Yeah. Oh, wait, you went on mute, Stephen.
Yeah, can you hear me now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. We've come a long way. I mean, when I first joined the board, we had nothing even close to this. I mean, nothing. So I commend Daniel, I commend you for putting this together. How it seems very comprehensive. Thank you, Rufina, for working on it. It's a huge, huge step forward to inform our new board members. So thank you.
No doubt. Yeah, I joined the board in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic, and then there was George Floyd. And so it was like, well, you better know what you're doing pretty quickly here because we have some real work to do really fast. So appreciate this. It's really meaningful. Okay, any other thoughts, questions, comments, or discussion topics from the board? And I'm getting a lot of comments that a meal before the board meeting would be great. I was hearing from David and Alfredo about some yummy taco spots that I had not been to, so maybe that's an opportunity. So if you've got a suggestion, it doesn't have to be a 4-star restaurant, can just be an easy place for us to meet up.
But somewhere where we can talk, because if we're yelling at each other, it's not going to help us.
Well, if we're yelling at each other, we've got something else going on, but maybe just the music is loud at a restaurant. Okay, well, thank you all. Appreciate the conversation today, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right.